All right, we moved on to the fillet. We're gonna go ahead and get our pan. Now this is one where we're gonna wanna get our pan hot. It might get hard to hear because I'm turning the fan on above the stove, but this is where searing meat will become very important. I'm gonna cook my filet rare because that's the way I like to eat it, so I'm never gonna actually put it in the oven. I will talk about how and the different levels of cooking in the oven. So my filet, it's a nice side muscle. Everybody else's will be a little bit bigger. So one of the things that I advise with all the roast, don't think you're seasoning a single slice. You're really seasoning the whole thing. So go ahead and season it heavy. I think that's one of the biggest, especially when it comes to meat cooking and cooking roast, that people tend to under-season the outside of it, not thinking that that is a very small percentage of the meat. We're going to start with some olive oil, and then just a little bit of leftover butter from the potatoes on we did earlier. The butter will help enrich it, give it some flavor. It'll help it go. We're going to also build a pan sauce right in here, so that'll kind of help. We're going to let that go. But it will also help us tell when it's time to put the meat in, because the butter will start to brown. So as that's working and getting good and hot, we'll wait for that little bit of brownness, and then we're going to go ahead and we're going to sear our meat up on all sides. And all that bubbling out of there is the butter fat that is in there, and that's actually what will make it brown. Burnt or Mosetta brown butter is one of my favorite things to use in cooking. I think it's one of the best subtle flavors that you can have. And I mean, it's butter. It's one of my favorite things. So you see it starting to brown. Just gonna get that on. And go ahead and get my filet in there. And I'm going to keep this on high the whole time. So you see the butter browning around the outside, that's good. Not a bad idea to have a spoon. And just as it's searing, just to kind of baste it a little bit, give it some extra flavor. Ratatouille sitting back there. We have our potatoes in the oven. They got about 10 or so minutes left at this point. Not overly important, but just to kind of see as this is going, I will pull them out so everybody can kind of see where they're at. As you can see, a lot of that butter is cooked around the outside. You know, it's a nice loose thing. You can see those potatoes on top still aren't really well done. So we're going to go ahead back in. It's going to need at least 10 more minutes. Maybe a little bit more. So we want to let this sit. We want to be patient with it as it sears, because we're looking for that really nice golden sear. Dark brown sear. Sorry, not golden. I would recommend, if you don't have a hood fan that's good, do this outside on the grill as a side burner, or make sure a window's open. You'll end up smoking everything kind of up. Talk a little bit about thermometers and temping meat. I always gotten used to using a digital thermometer. CDN, I think, is the brand on this. It has the little safe temperatures. Please ignore 165 for beef, because that's just massacring it. So with this particular thermometer, the probe is right here. It'll tell you the temperature pretty quickly. It's an instant read. That's one way to tell when a roast is done. The general rule of thumb is 120 to 125 is rare, 125 to 130 is medium, 130 to 135 is mid-well, 140 to 145, 150 is well or above. You gotta realize too, we're cooking a little baby roast here, so it's gonna carry over some. Not a whole lot, it's not a giant piece of meat. So I just want to keep that going. And once your skillet's hot, you know, what I like to do too is I like to move it to a different spot when I go for that second and third sear. Just because that part of the skillet can be so much hotter and ready to go. So you see we got all those nice brown butters building up. I'm actually going to decrease my temp just a little bit. So, one of the other things, when we cook steaks, in the restaurant industry, we typically don't temp them. We use a method just with our hand and feel. An open palm, that would be rare, mid-rare, medium, mid-well, well. Just all goes by how much liquid's cooked out of the meat, and also kind of, you know, where everything's kind of bind up in it. So I'm actually going to give this a little bit of time in the oven.